this on to the Facebook. And so we're going to take a look at um, we're going to take a look at we're going to look at we'll look at this and now you'll see how the people actually get the law. All right. So the last thing we read was that Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went his way to his own land. So it seems as though Yitro was successful at reuniting the family, and it seems as though Moses has now been reunited with his wife and children, because it doesn't say that he goes back with them. Because I guess you could say that if that was the case, then he would have, it would say that the father went back with his daughter and his grandchildren. So that is, I'm just making sure that we're actually streaming right now on Facebook. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I don't see that it's up yet. It says that it is, but I don't see it. By the way, as I'm doing this right now, I think we need to take a moment now that we're live and being taped and for all of posterity. I think it's very important to wish Mary a happy birthday, because today it is her birthday. So we did know that it is her birthday today. We're waiting for everybody to come on, but let's wish Mary. It is her birthday today. We sang happy birthday to her yesterday, but that was only a precursor, a taste of what we were going to do today. So let's do a happy birthday for her, actually on her birthday, for Queen Mary of Valencia. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy
birthday, dear Mary. Happy birthday to you. Yay.
Thank you.
Yay, Mary.
And Joni Thrall's birthday and last Saturday, well, actually it was Cheryl's birthday on the 11th, but on the 10th we had our Havara.
Yeah.
And so we celebrated their birthday.
You did all the birthdays together?
Happy birthday in Hebrew.
Well, that's fantastic. Now you're making me feel guilty that we didn't sing it in. We used to.
Yeah,
We used to. Everybody got sick of it.
Mine this year is on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the 26th.
Oh my gosh, what a great birthday to have. It's the
Isn't
birthday.
it nice?
It's the birthday of the world that day.
How about that?
Yeah,
Mine,
Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world, right? So
yeah, and I'll be 93.
and we never, Joyce never focuses on years. No, she never focuses. This is just another way of celebrating your life. So
Yes.
I'm at that rate right now, which is they're happening. Seems like my birthdays are coming too frequently. So I'm at that age where they're coming way too frequently. So anyways, all right. So happy birthday. And again, sometimes we don't know that it's someone's birthday that day, but we did know today. Anyways, so let's take a look at chapter 19. And it says, speaking of birthdays, it was a Rosh Chodesh. It wasn't a birthday, but on the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. So again, we know they're in the area around the desert, but not necessarily right here around Sinai until around this time. Now, I will tell you, it actually said at the beginning here, the very beginning of chapter 18, that they were at the mountain of God.
Mhm.
So it seems as though the mountain of God is already, again, as we know, the place where Moses first met God at the burning bush, right? And that happens at Mount Sinai. And no matter what, we're there. And it makes sense then, I guess, that you can say that Yitro comes and finds him here, because remember, he was pasturing Yitro's flock when he was at Mount Sinai. So whether they were walking there and whether the Yitro situation was here, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but here's the way the Torah sets it up, is that they are at Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. Here it's called Har Sinai. And right here it says, having journeyed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness. Israel encamped there in front of the mountain. And it says, and Moses went up to God. Adonai called to him from the mountain, saying, thus shall you say to the house of Jacob, and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now then, if you obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine, but you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. So the way the Ten Commandments here, at least, well, hasn't said the Ten Commandments here, but this moment where God has basically said, I took you out of Egypt, I bore you on eagle's wings. That's a very famous phrase, al kanfei nesharim, on eagle's wings, right? It's one of the, correct. And so Mike loves eagles. It's his spirit animal.
Wow.
And so this is one of those lines in the Bible that compares, if you will, God to the eagle, right? Because he's bringing them there, and it's almost like he's protecting them and carrying them with the strength of eagles to. Yeah, look, maybe it's a messenger. Maybe it's like, yeah, but this is almost, again, like this is the way God brings them on the wings of eagles. Now, the wings of eagles was used as also the name for the rescue of the Jews originally from Yemen. And there was Operation Magic Carpet, Operation Susanna, all of these kinds of missions that brought Jews secretly and with great risk to Israel during Israel's early days, and even up, of course, to the Ethiopian Exodus, have been to some extent like miracles. But what, of course, is so interesting about the last 50 years or so of rescuing these Jews, because remember, the original waves of immigrants to Israel came through on boats secretly, evading the British blockades, right? Like the Exodus ships and all those other ships that came in, they came in by ship. But by the time Israel was able to establish itself and to build Ben Gurion Airport, then they brought people in on airplanes. And so when that happened, and when they actually brought plane loads of people in from these countries, that must have been pretty powerful to see people literally coming in on the wings of eagles, to have them come in on those planes. And so that was, to some extent, not just bringing people to Israel, but it's fulfilling the Bible. It's fulfilling that line to bring people in on eagle's wings. So there is again, this understanding that I created everything. Everything is mine. All peoples are mine. The whole world is mine. But if you keep my laws, you will be my treasured people. And here the word is in Hebrew, segulah, a treasured people. And, look, we get this idea of covenant, that is a covenant right here, a brit.
Right.
Keep my covenant. But again, we talk about the chosenness of the Jewish people, but it is a responsibility, because God is again, the Torah asserts that everybody is God's people. Everything is God's. But if you keep my law, you will be a treasured possession among the peoples. And so you have to actually keep the covenant. It says, Ushmartem et briti, my covenant. Guard and keep my covenant. Faithfully, it's translated as faithfully keep my covenant. And so you have to actually do that in order to be the treasured possession. It's not like you're just my favorite people, but you have to actually keep the law in order to be my favorite people. And also, as part of that, you get to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, a goy kadosh. And so we use the word goy to describe a nation, usually non-Jews, but we're also called a goy. We're called a goy kadosh, a holy nation. And also the words mamlechet kohanim, which is a kingdom. The word melech means king. Mamlechet is a kingdom, the kingdom. And so we're a kingdom of priests, mamlechet kohanim, which means that every Jew to some extent is a Kohen, not just the priests, not just the priestly tribe, not just the descendants of Aaron, but the entire people are a holy nation. Now, I guess you could say within our group, we have our own Kohanim, but to the world, it's as if the Jewish people are a holy nation, a kingdom of priests to everyone else. And so the Jewish people, to some extent, have to work as priests to the rest of the world. So within our own group, we have priests, but for the rest of the world, each and every one of us, every man, woman, and child of Israel is a messenger, is a priest, is a holy worker for God. That's an interesting idea because we know about the chosenness part, but we forget about the part that we actually have to do something in order to be chosen. And also with that becomes this responsibility to be an entire nation of holy people, to be a nation that essentially works like priests, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. When we live up to that responsibility of being a holy people. But that is the idea. It's what God seems to want. Before we get the commandments. So Moses came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all that Adonai had commanded him. All those assembled answered as one. All that Adonai has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back the people's words to Adonai. Now here's the weird thing. He hasn't told them anything yet. It just said everything that Adonai has spoken, we will do. Well, we assume that what he just said is you have to keep the law, and then you get to be a nation of priests. You get to be my holy people. You get to be my treasure people. But he has actually told them what's in the law.
Mm-hmm.
But they seem to want to do it. Because here they say, we will do. Naaseh. So what's interesting about this is we learn a very important lesson. And it's because it says that God, Moses comes back and tells God, yeah, the people are ready to do it. But they haven't heard it yet. And so what's interesting about this is that it basically says that the Jews said the word naaseh, we will do, before nishma, before they heard it. So we say naaseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. Well, the do part comes before the hearing part. So if somebody came and told you, I have a really important thing for you to do, and you go, I'll do it. And they say, well, I didn't tell you what I have to do yet. Now you could either say those people are crazy or they're not really going to do it.
Well,
Or you
didn't
could
he
say,
say
well,
you have to keep my covenant? You have to keep my agreement.
yeah,
But they don't have an
they
agreement
don't
yet.
have agreement.
Oh, got it.
But they were basically saying, we'll do it. We'll keep the agreement. We'll do our part. And they haven't even heard the part yet. So this is a weird thing. It's not what you'd expect. And it's
Yeah.
also not what you'd expect from people who already showed that they don't seem to have any faith. Yeah, Mike.
If someone came to you and said, Mark, you're gonna be king of Santa Clarita if you follow my law, you're gonna do it.
I'd hope I would, but I would probably want to see what was in the law first. I'd probably want to know, hey, okay, but do I have to, what comes with that? What most of us, we have we have at least one lawyer on the line right now. Most lawyers would tell you, definitely read the contract first. Before you agree to it, before you sign your name, read it first. So these people just said, we'll sign it, and they haven't even read it yet. So,
They don't know this.
okay, so Mary said, this is with God. But we've already seen that these people are capable of already not having faith in God. But here they definitely do the right thing. Well, they do the right thing. And of course, we know they break the laws, but we're not at that stage yet. We're at the good part. We're at the good part where they say that we'll do this. Now, what's interesting about this, and I want to have Joyce's theory about this later on, which is that because Joyce actually has written a book about, and Lee together wrote a book about the covenant of marriage and the agreements that people actually enter into. She encourages people to actually have a covenant, right? Have an agreement,
Contract.
right?
Mhm.
I'd call it more of a covenant, but yeah, she called it contract. But to me, it's almost like a spiritual covenant, right?
Yes,
And
it
so-
is.
And so what's interesting about this, well, that's what Joyce takes very seriously in her teachings of marriage relationships, and Lee did too. They wrote the book on it. And so the idea of having a covenant, having a contract, is a renewable contract that people come to, and they write the contract, they agree to the terms, and then it's in the contract. They can say, but we promise we're going to do these things. Now, and we'll talk about, Joyce, feel free to pop in here anytime. But what's interesting about Joyce's and Lee's approach to this was that you counsel a lot of people in this, but it was all after they were already married, right?
Yes.
Almost always. So people got the contract and started working on contracts after they were already married. So that's almost exactly what the people do. Because what we do, and again, and not everybody has a contract, but they probably should, or at least, again, think about that. What are the responsibilities that the other person, you have to them and they have to you, and know what those are. But what's interesting is we oftentimes get married and we don't really discuss that at all. What are the things that we, and I talk about that with couples when I meet with them, but I usually meet with them for a couple hours total before their wedding, and they don't come to me for counseling. Some churches and some ministers, require it. We don't. We haven't in the Jewish community we don't do that. But the idea behind it would be, again, and I do talk to the couples about the type of expectations that they have for each other to make sure that they're on the same page, at least on some basic things. But we do that. We basically say we're going to get married to each other. And sometimes we agree on what those requirements and what we need from the other party, what that covenant would be. And oftentimes we don't. And that's obviously, according to Schulman's, one of the problems that people get into when they get married. So we oftentimes do that in marriage. We'll sign the covenant, we'll exchange rings, we'll sign a contract, and we really don't.
And we'll make vows.
We'll make vows. Yeah, exactly. I mean, those are vows. And so we actually do that all the time. And so this idea of naaseh, we will do before we say I do, right? Well, we don't do it in Jewish tradition usually, but we say these vows, but the vows really are very general and they're not very specific. And so it's weird that we do that, because that's our most important contract that we ever, our most important covenant that we ever enter is our marriage contract. And we really don't take it we don't really talk. Yeah, but it's right. It's the most important contract that you ever kind of agree to go into in your life.
It's interesting. We didn't have our contract written down, but we did have a very long discussion before we even decided to get married, that if we got married, we would review our relationship face to face and have a discussion every month. We're not going to let things lie under the carpet, pile up. We did discuss it before we had the formal wedding. We didn't have a formal contract before, but we had the discussion before and the verbal agreement.
Yeah. And again, without giving away too much of your story, is that you also were both coming into this as a second marriage. And so you understood what it actually means to have, an understanding of that, and you learned. So this is again, I think, one of the interesting ways that we say naaseh, that we will do before we say, and what did you say actually? What are you actually telling me to do? There's a great midrash from this Na'aseh v'nishma. There's a great lesson that we learn that the Jews said to God, we'll do it,
Yes.
or they heard it, right? And the midrash goes, and it's a fairly famous midrash, so you may have heard it before. And it kind of goes to what we just read, which is that God says to them, you get to be a treasured people, but every nation's mine. And so the midrash from this is that the juxtaposition of these statements is that God actually went around and asked other people whether they wanted to have the 10 commandments. And so he went to the Ammonites and said, will you take my 10 commandments? And they said to them, the Ammonites said to God, like most people would do, what's in them? And God said, well, it says in here, you're not allowed to have adultery. You're not allowed to commit adultery. And they said, oh no, we're not into that at all. We love adultery. We love adultery. We're not signing up for that. Go away, God. We don't need that. And then God goes to God goes to the Philistines and says, you want to have my commandments? And they say, well, look, what's in them? And God says, well, it says you can't steal. And they say, oh no, that's part of what we do. We go around, we pillage, we loot places. That's what we do. It's part of our operation. That's what we do. That's how we keep together. We can't do it. And so, God, take them somewhere else. So God goes around and asks everybody if they want him. And they all say the same thing. What's in them? And they say, no, we don't want these laws. And finally, God comes to us. And we don't even ask what's in them. We'll say, you're God. Of course we'll do it. And so what God loves about us is the fact that we didn't ask what's in them.
Uh-huh.
Right? Is that the Jewish people said Na'aseh before they even said Nishma. Now, of course, there is a postscript to that story, which is a later midrash, probably written about 20 years ago that I heard, which is God went to the Israelites and said, do you want my commandments? And the Israelites said, how much are they? And they said, they're free. He says, we'll take 10. But that's a more modern midrash, and it's also fairly anti-Semitic, I guess. But I'm sure some rabbi wrote that.
That 10.
We'll take 10. How much are they? Yeah, I didn't write that. Anyways, so they do say will do. And before they say, tell me. So Moses brings back the news to God that the people are ready to take him. And Adonai said to Moses, I will come to you in a thick cloud in order that the people may hear you when I speak with you. And so trust you ever after. And Moses reported the people's words to Adonai. So God says, I'm going to come and appear to you and I'll speak to you. And Adonai said to Moses, go to tell the people and warn them to stay pure today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes. Let them be ready for the third day. For the third day, Adonai will come down in the sight of all the people on Mount Sinai. So go and stay pure for the next couple of days. Wash your clothes and be ready, because 3 days, in total of 3 days from now, including the day that I'm talking to you, so this day and then the next 2 days, you got to stay pure. So you got to wash your clothes. You got to be ready. So there is a understanding of this. It doesn't say it right here, but the understanding of this is, that just says pure. That's just the same thing. That the pure part of this is that you will not engage in sex before. So for the next 3 days, you're going to be almost like angels. You're going to be clean. You're going to not have any other bodily fluids on you. You're going to be kind of, yeah. And you have to be clean, right? And by the way, it doesn't say the men, it says everybody. It doesn't say the men. So the directions continue. You shall set bounds for the people round about, saying, beware of going up to the mountain or touching the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death, without being touched by either being stoned or shot, which is weird because they didn't have guns back then, but they are definitely talking about, stoning or some type of an arrow shot or slingshot. Beast or person, a trespasser shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, then they may go up on the mountain. So there is this pre-time where they're not allowed to come anywhere near the mountain, anything, And then it says there'll be a sound of the shofar, except here it actually says, here it actually says the yovel, which is another word for a blast. But if you look here, it says sounds of a long blast, which are not necessarily shofar. Later on, it does say that there's a sound of the shofar, but a yovel is a sound. It sounds like a horn, at least. It's a blast, so it doesn't. I'm not sure why it says ram's horn there. It actually doesn't say ram's horn. It doesn't say.
What does Mary say?
What does Mary say? Trumpet, yeah. So the King James actually says trumpet, which is probably a little bit better, but it may not even be. It may actually be a better translation to simply say a long blast. I don't know if the Septuagint or some other text has the word shofar there, but a yovel is actually the sound that comes out. So it could be that it's more just to say the word, though you'll hear a long blast, which implies that the sound's not even coming from a shofar, which means like the sound isn't coming from you, it's coming from me. And it's an alarm sound, which it's God. God can make any sound God wants. So the word yovel, by the way, is the root for the word jubilee. So the jubilee begins with a long blast, which is where the word jubilee actually comes from. The word yovel is the word jubilee is from Hebrew. It's one of those words like amen that is directly from Hebrew. Hallelujah comes right through. Jubilee year, yeah. So a jubilee is, 50 years usually, at least by the biblical count. But one of the things that we look at is where does it come from? And it comes from the sound of the actual sound. I shouldn't say a sound of a horn. It could be a trumpet. And that's why the King James says trumpet. Moses came down from the mountain to the people and warned the people to stay pure, and they washed their clothes. So they seem to know what that means, by the way. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. The men, and here's what Moses says, the men among you shall not go near a woman. Now, it doesn't actually say the men among you, but that's why it's in parentheses, but it says you shall not go near a woman. It probably doesn't say, Mary, in the King James, the men among you shall not go near a woman. Yeah, come not at your wives, which is another way of translating al tigshu al hisha, right? Which is one of the reasons why we keep this tradition. So yeah, keep an eye out for the stuff that we do at Yom Kippur, which is coming in purity, coming with washed clothes, coming, some people go to the mikvah before the high holidays. And there's also the tradition that the Bible doesn't say. Mike only washes his clothes before Yom Kippur. I don't believe that, Mike. Anyways, I don't believe. No, I didn't mean that, Mike. But Mike says he never washes. So he's sitting by himself. So Mike, no, we do follow that tradition of washing before. And again, even though the Torah doesn't say not to engage in sex, in the Torah it says literally, don't on Yom Kippur. You create a situation where you create it doesn't say you abstain. It says you are supposed to afflict yourself. And so all it says is, toe, which is to afflict yourself, which the rabbis then interpret as not eating, not drinking, not washing. And there it is, not washing. So you wash yourself before, and then on Yom Kippur itself, you don't wash. You wash before Yom Kippur, but not on Yom Kippur, and not to have sex, and then also not to wear leather shoes. So washing of the feet is a different situation. It's yes, the Levites wash the Kohanim's feet before they offer the blessing, and they do the blessing. When they do the Birkat Kohanim, what called the Duchanan, when you do that, they actually do a washing. But that has to do more with, again, the priestly benediction. But I guess you could say it's all about washing. Yes, washing the hands. So it's similar a little bit, but here again, everybody is supposed to be pure. Notice, by the way, it didn't have to say, they didn't say, you shall not go near your husband. I guess they figured the women did not need to be cautioned in that same way as the men did. So it doesn't say. I wasn't going to say anything, Joanne. You said it. I didn't say it, Joanne. Okay. Well,
Second class.
yeah, but it doesn't say that women didn't come near, right? The women were there. They just weren't, men were not supposed to have sex with them. What doesn't, other than the fact that it doesn't say that, but that's why the translation "do not go near your wife" is a better translation than "do not go near a woman," because the understanding that you don't go near a woman seems to imply that women inherently have some level of impurity, which is not what it really says. It says don't go near your wife. I mean,
Rabbi,
yeah.
Gloria's is a little bit more broad. Says you'll abstain from any relations.
From sexual relations.
Whatever, same thing.
Well, it's interesting because again, yes, you could say that it needs further explanation, but the words literally could be translated as either the literal translation, al tigshu al isha, is don't go near a woman or don't go near your wife. But any other, the next level of that, of course, is that they're literally talking about not touching them, but not to have intimate contact with them. I mean, the words are ambiguous enough that they could be seen as not touching them at all, or again, the understanding that most of the texts have that is we're talking about sexual contact, not just innocent. I don't say innocent, that's the wrong word. Non-sexual contact, I would say, just incidental contact. Incidental contact. You brush by a woman and she you fall down and you touched her accidentally. No, you're out. You're out. You bumped it. I bumped into her. Anyways, so but it is part of this ritual of purity that they didn't. So look, I mean, you could imagine and understand now why we talked about it yesterday. Actually, on Tuesday class was Reverend Lynn asked about why, whether celibacy within Judaism was an issue, because we were talking about yesterday about Elijah, who, according to some Jewish tradition, lived as celibate, which is unusual even for the prophets. The prophets, it doesn't say the prophets are celibate, but Elijah never has a family, he never has a wife. And so she asked the question about celibacy within Judaism. And I said, the issue is, by the time the Christians come along, there already were the Essenes. And the Essenes, from what we know, at least some of them were celibate. But where does that even come from? From here, from the idea that at least when they were going through a process of purity, that they couldn't engage in sex. So did some Jews say, well, we never know when God's going to come down and talk to us and give us a new rule, that you better be in a state of purity? Well, guess what? The Essenes believed that. They believed that at any moment God was coming back and they were about to get a new law. And how do we know that? Because they wrote it. And they were constantly writing. They were writing all the time, which is why we found the Dead Sea Scrolls right nearby, because they were writing scrolls all the time. They were writing rules all the time. They believed that, like, when they weren't eating or sleeping, let's write texts. We found their scriptorium. We found the actual tables that they wrote on, which means that they were probably even more that we haven't found. And look, that was a central part of their facility, was their scriptorium. If they were doing that, they were expecting there to be a new law real soon. And we know, because we found their stuff, which is why we believe that some of these Essenes eventually became Christian, or at least set the stage for Christianity, because when people found these texts, they said, this sounds a whole lot like the Christian scriptures. And what it did for a lot of people is say, hey, the Jewish people, at least some of them, were already in that mindset. And some of them were already celibate. Yeah. Yeah. So the theory is that John the Baptist was, if he wasn't, he was darn close, which meant that maybe he wasn't an Essene any longer, but he had been trained by them, he'd lived with them, and now he was with the people. Because what we know about, at least the way the Christian Bible describes it, is that John the Baptist was working with other people when he meets Jesus. Josephus writes extensively about John the Baptist. He does not write extensively about Jesus. As a matter of fact, we don't know that he even wrote about Jesus. But that being said, if he did, he wrote one line. but he wrote pages about John the Baptist. So if John the Baptist wasn't an Essene, he was baptizing people and he was making them like him, but he wasn't, according to the text in the Christian Bible and to some extent in Josephus, he wasn't just baptizing women. But of course, this idea of baptizing people and making them pure and getting them ready for God, it all comes back to this, which is, hey, God's going to come back and we better be ready for him because it might be today. And if we're not ready today, then what's going to happen to us? We're going to wind up dying. So we better be on the right side of this when they come back. So these were people that were in a perpetual state of cleanliness. And according to what we read about in the Essenes, they were going to the mikveh 4 or 5 times a day. Yeah. And they were constantly going into the mikveh. So every time after they went to the bathroom, every time they wanted to be in a constant state of purity because they thought that at any moment, on the 3rd day, as the morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain and a very loud blast of the horn. And there it is, a kol shofar. There's the word, kol shofar. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. So that's what they were expecting to have happen, which was a very, very dramatic scene of thunder, lightning, clouds, and loud blast.
That means God could blow the shofar.
But if God's not blowing the shofar, he's blowing something that sounds a lot like a shofar. Yeah. And it says it was very loud. The word here is chazak me'od, a very strong blast. And it says, and all the people were in the camp trembled. And it says, and that's why we're looking at the Hebrew a little bit more, because there's so many Hebrew words here that pop up later on, like yovel or shofar and all these other words. Because, we really haven't heard the shofar. Well, we hear the shofar because we're reading other parts of the Bible, but like this is the first time we've heard a shofar being blown in the Bible. Yeah. We haven't really heard it in Genesis. So this is a very sensory experience. And here's another word that we have right here. Right here. Vayechered kol ha'am. The whole nation trembled. And this is the word that we use, chared, for the word haredim. The haredim. Service? Yeah. That God, we read these lines, that God appeared to us on the mountain. But here's the words that we trembled. And this is the word haredim. So when we talk about the haredim in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox, that's what they call them in Israel. We call them Haredi other places too, but really, it's a Hebrew word, and we used to call them just ultra-Orthodox. But the word Haredim literally means the tremblers, the people who tremble. And so it's interesting that the word that we use for Orthodox, in English, we call them Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox. They're not just Orthodox, they're ultra-Orthodox. But the word we use in Hebrew are the tremblers, the people who tremble before God. And they don't have an issue with it so much because, look, they come back to this moment when we got the law that we were trembling, that being in the presence of God causes us to tremble. You make up your mind. Look, there's definitely a sense that people who are living in fear and who are living with a sense of, fear that they're going to break the law or that they're in the presence of God all the time, they're being judged all the time, that they'll tremble. But this is what we say rather than ultra-Orthodox, because the word Orthodox literally means strict in practice or straight in practice. Like we say orthodontic, right? Orthodontic means straight teeth. Orthodoxy means straight dogma. It means straight belief or straight practice. It's really orthopraxis, which is orthodox, straight in your practice, non-deviating in your practice. Orthodoxy literally means orthodox in your dogma, straight in your dogma and your belief. But in Hebrew, the word really has a sense not of your straightness, but of your emotional state, which is one of fear, one of trembling. Well, actually, you could say it's more than just your emotional state, it's your physical state. because trembling is taking your emotions to a point where you're actually physically trembling, where you're actually, your body is shaking. And that's what it says is happening to them. They're shaking. It says everybody was shaking. Moses led the people out of the camp toward God, and they took their places at the foot of the mountain. Now, Mount Sinai was all in smoke, for Adonai had come down upon it in the fire. The smoke rose like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled very much. And here you have the mountain was trembling. And so the smoke and the fire was very real. So God was on it in fire, and there was smoke, and the whole mountain was trembling, was shaking. So it sounds like an earthquake almost.
Mhm.
Volcano, that's right, a volcano, earthquake. So it's a sound and light experience being at Mount Sinai. It's also a full sensory experience because the ground is also shaking. So this is a really, really dramatic moment. It's very, in some ways, almost a scary moment. And the blare of the horn grew louder and louder. And as Moses spoke, God answered him in thunder. And God came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Adonai called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And so here, it doesn't actually say what Moses said. He said, I'm here, God. And God answered him. It doesn't actually say what they said. And it says that, it says God, God called him up. It doesn't actually say what he said. Come up, Moses. And Adonai said to Moses, go down and warn the people not to break through to Adonai to gaze, lest many of them perish. The priests also who come near Adonai must stay pure, lest Adonai break out against them. So God is definitely speaking about himself, itself, in the third person here. But God warns them not to come close. Right? Don't come anywhere near us right now. And tell them not to step up on the mountain, which is weird because you're kind of thinking, well, there's an earthquake, there's fire. Like, who's going to want to go there? It seems like they're going to want to get away as far away as possible. Seems like God maybe isn't fully grasping the effect that he's having on human beings, which is one where they're scared to death. So they're quaking. But he says, tell them not to come near. But Adonai said to Moses, the people cannot come onto Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set bounds in the mountain and sanctify it. So Adonai said to him, go down and come back together with Aaron, but let not the priests or the people break through to come to Adonai, lest God break out against them. Which is interesting because now God says, come back with Aaron. So it's almost as if God is saying to them, you don't come anywhere near here. And Moses says, look, you already told us that. You told us not to come near. We're making sure no one comes near. And what Moses isn't saying is like, why would anyone want to come near? This is crazy right now. Look, no one said it, so I'm going to say it because unless someone else wants to say it, there are people who've said that this moment sounds a whole lot like a spaceship landing on Mount Sinai. And so people have said before, this doesn't sound like anything that we would have experienced thousands of years ago, but we can kind of imagine what a rocket would sound like, or some kind of spacecraft would sound like if it was coming down on a mountain, which would be there a lot of fire, there'd be a lot of smoke, there'd be a lot of noise, and there would be a tremendous sonic force. I don't know what to tell you other than people have said it. I'm not making it up. I'm not saying it's there. I'm not saying that it's what happened, but I will tell you that it is very much it sounds very much like what something like that would have been described at by people who lived thousands of years ago. All I can tell you is I went to see, as some of you know, I went to see the space shuttle take off at Cape Canaveral when Columbia went up with Elon Ramon. So they invited my dad and I.
Know that you were there.
Yeah, so my dad and I went there and at the launch. It's hard to believe, it was almost 20 years ago. So
More than 20, isn't it?
it was was it 2000? I can't even remember now.
That's in 90.
No. Can't remember now. Oh, is that terrible? 2003. Anyways, I was 3 miles away from I was in a designated area with family and friends with them, but I was still miles away. But you could feel that. You could feel the burst, the sonic boom of that when it took off, and we were miles away. And man, the sound of it and the force of it was just unbelievable. And I'll never forget the force of it. To think that human beings, had actually created something that you could. Yeah, it was February 2003. So next year will be 20 years. Not next year. 6 months from now. So when it took off, I thought to myself, and by the way, they didn't have the family ever since the Challenger. They didn't have the family in the same area, the immediate family. So we weren't there with the family. We were there with the friends and the people who were invited. Took us by a bus to that area, but they don't have the family there because what they did during the Challenger is people videotaped the family's reactions when the space shuttle exploded, and they said, we're never going to have that again. So they didn't have the immediate family there. But I remember when the space shuttle launched, I'll never forget, I said to myself, oh, thank God, there was no, it was only a few years after, the Challenger. And I said, thank God nothing happened. And that was just like my relief of seeing it go up. And we didn't know, we didn't know that, at that moment, the space shuttle essentially was rendered, inoperable to land. We didn't know that. But yeah, it's just amazing the force that creates. So, look, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible that this was something that, our ancestors were trying to describe, that we actually have the capability of doing now. But this is something, again, that is unique in human history, like the crossing of the Red Sea that we read a few weeks ago, where literally things are happening on the mountain that are not normal. These are not things that can be explained. And God actually says to the people, don't come anywhere near it. So Moses went down to the people and he spoke to them. So he gives them another warning. And now chapter 20 begins with the actual words. So this chapter 20 is the 10 Commandments, and it's pretty much the entire chapter. And that's what we're going to read today, finish with today. But I will tell you, nowhere in this list of the 10 Commandments does it say, these are the 10 Commandments. It does not say that. It says, Vayidaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'eleh. God spoke all these words, saying, and again, here's the tradition varies as to the division of the commandments, which is an interesting way of saying, and again, it's repeated again, the 10 Commandments we can also find in Deuteronomy chapter 5. We'll talk about that when we read it, when we're done. The 10 Commandments are actually repeated in the Torah. I would say verbatim, but it's not quite verbatim. It's almost verbatim. They're repeated again.
If it wasn't said, this is the 10 Commandments.
Mhm.
That word.
Yep.
Then how did we come up with that?
Because tradition later on, as they are described, is that they are described as the 10 Commandments, Aseret HaDibrot. So we start to hear that phrase being used, and it seems as though that within the Bible itself, or by the time the Bible was finished, there was already the tradition that these commandments would be divided by 10. But what's interesting is that the division of them as lines or as numbers wasn't really important the way at least that they were given, that they're given here. I only want to point that out because we don't expect that. And so when we read it, we almost have to, I'm just going to tell you to unlearn that idea that as we're about to have is 10. And the reason that that's important is because if you look at the way that they're laid out in different Bibles, they're laid out differently because no one really knows where the 10 are begin or end, which is why it says right here, tradition varies as to the division of the commandments. So the first line 100% is not the 10 commandments. This is the introduction to the 10 commandments. But again, we call them commandments because the word that we use here are devarim, which are translated as things, but also as words. And we call them the Aseret Hadibrot, which are the 10 sayings. They're not saying the commandments, we don't say the mitzvot. We actually call them the 10 sayings or the 10 words, 10 things. But these are the things that God actually said. Now, we do believe that the rest of the Torah, God spoke to us. And so we say the other commandments, the other 603 commandments, because we count 613 mitzvot, which again, there are different traditions about which are those 613. But the idea that there's 613 commandments is a very old tradition. And so if 10 of them are the 10 commandments, it means there's 603 other ones that are here in the Bible. And they really start here because we don't have commandments in the book of Genesis. They don't exist. The only commandment we have in Genesis is that you shall circumcise your children on the 8th day that he tells to Abraham. Other than that, there's really no commandment in the entire book of Genesis. So we really have one whole book of the Torah. There's no commandments, Genesis. And then the commandments start in Exodus. And the only commandments we've gotten up until now are the commandments to have Passover. Well, that was a commandment. Passover every year to get the chametz out of your house and we read about it a couple weeks ago, right? To have matzah and maror, those are commandments. Those are mitzvot. So those actually come before the 10 commandments. So if anyone asks, are these the first commandments in the Bible? No, they're close. They're almost, but they're not. They're the first commandments that we get that you could say are laws for people to keep all the time, every day. Passover commandments are only for Passover. Circumcision commandments are only for men on the 8th day. Kind of useful, very important commandments, but very specific. These commandments are for people every day. There's never a day when these commandments are not enforced. There's never a person that these aren't applicable to. Circumcision is only applicable to a boy. So here's where they start.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a quick question.
Yep.
My Hebrew is very poor, but Exodus 20, line 1, the first word is
Vayidaber, which is God spoke.
oh, so it's
Vayidaber Elohim. So God spoke at Kol HaDevarim. So the word daber is the same root as Devarim. So God spoke all these speakings, or God said all these words. So here it says Kol HaDevarim, all these words that we're about to read, but it doesn't say these 10 words that we're about to say. And again, they're not 10 words or 10 lines or whatever, these 10 commandments, but it doesn't actually say that. So just keep that in mind. And that's really helpful because when you see different orders of the Bible of how they lay out the 10 commandments, this is why. And so it's weird to think that there's not even like a straight answer on which are the 10 commandments or how they're laid out. You'll see why in a second. So the first line of the commandments is, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Now there's a real question of, is that a commandment? Is that isn't that just the statement, right? So some people say that this is the prologue, or this is the yeah. So, this is the case for why these are our laws, because God is the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And so the understanding is this isn't just any God that gave you these laws. This is the God Adonai, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. So it actually starts with, I am the Lord your God. So most people say that this is not a commandment, so that the first line is not a commandment. Though there are some people, and at least the way this translation has it, that there's actually is a colon here, which means it's part of the next line, which is, you shall have no other gods before me. So it's possible that line 3 is actually the first line, or line 2 and 3 are the first commandment. So Mary, what does your Bible show? There's the King James.
There's a period for the first.
Yeah, so the King James actually kind of has that line as a, as the prologue. Yeah. Some people would say it's like a preamble, but it's not a very amble. It's not a lot, we have a preamble to the Constitution, we the people, which is a statement of what we did, why we're doing this. But it's a very short line. It's a very short preamble. It's a line. But however we understand that, it can either be part of 2 and 3 could be the first commandment, or this is the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. So this is considered to be that line by itself is considered to be by some people the first commandment. So is that part of the first commandment, Mary?
Yes.
Because some people also say that it's connected to this next line, which is, you shall not make for yourself a sculptured image or any other likeness of what is in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord, am your God, an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my mitzvot, keep my commandments. And so there is the word mitzvot. So we know that there's a word commandment, but here this is not said, these are the commandments. This is the words, these are the words. So some people say that this now is the second commandment, which is, the first commandment is not to have any other gods. So that's the law of monotheism. And then the next line, right, not to be polytheistic, which again is put it, we would say, in the negative form, which is not to have any other gods. And then the other line is also not to make any graven images or any likenesses, which is the law about idolatry. So there's actually 2 separate laws about this, which is the law of not having other gods, and then not making images. Now, most of us would say, isn't that one law? Because most of us would identify polytheism with idolatry. We'd say, yeah, polytheism is idolatry. But what's interesting about this is that it's actually not saying that, because you could understand it that people aren't even supposed to make a likeness of God. So they're not even supposed to make anything that is of God, or not even God, but any other thing that is made by God. So you don't make a statue of the sun to say, well, I don't really worship the sun God, but I worship the sun that was created by God. You say, nah, you don't make those either. You don't make any likeness of that. So you don't make a golden calf, which of course is what the people make later on. There's a question. Well, what about the cherubim? What about the kruvim that the God tells them to make, which are like angels? So it seems as though there might be an exception or two out there. The kruvim seem to be God's exception, if you will, that they're allowed to make those as part of the ark. And that's what it says. And we read about it for those who are on Tuesdays, where kruvim, big giant kruvim, these winged angels that were in the temple too, around Solomon's temple. So those seem to be okay, but not like anything else. So
Rabbi?
it's not just gods, it's actually these things. Yeah.
Well, I have two comments, because my Bible has footnotes, and it's pretty much what you said, that they're not allowed to create idols resembling him because he's has no visible form. And then I just had a comment about the angels in the Christian religion. We believe that God has angels, his like guardians for us. So
Yeah, and the Torah and the Bible says that too, right? So the Bible talks about angels, but the idea of making statues of them would seem to be perilously close to idolatry, but it's allowed.
God in our belief.
Yeah, but then you're not allowed to make a statue of God. Look,
Right, but
this is a major issue.
How can you make a statue of God if there isn't a vision of it?
Well, the Bible actually, it seems like here saying you can't make any statues.
Right.
So the Bible took this very seriously. I mean, and Jews took it very seriously. So when people said, well, the Romans put up these beautiful statues of the emperor, well, they also worship the emperor. And so they said, well, you can't have a statue of the emperor. I said, well, it's just a statue of the emperor. And they said, no, the Bible says you're not allowed to make any sculptured image. You're not supposed to do anything. Look, I'm going to tell you this right now, for those who haven't been to Israel. Israel is the only country in the world where you won't see statues of anybody. You won't see a statue. Every other country you go to, Europe, South America, Africa, we make statues of everybody. The holiest statue in our country is probably the statue of Abraham Lincoln and the Lincoln Monument, and the Lincoln Memorial. And they also have a statue now they just put up of Martin Luther King at the Martin Luther King Monument in Washington, D.C. We have no issue making statues of people. Judaism takes it very seriously. What? Statuary Hall in the Capitol, yeah. But we have these giant statues, and the Lincoln Memorial is literally a Greek temple. I mean, there's no difference. That was built literally along the lines of a Greek temple. The temple, to some of the temples of Zeus that we know of in ancient Greece. So that's even built on the same dimensions. But what's interesting about it is that Judaism says we're not supposed to make any statues. And so even in modern day Israel, they take this very seriously. So if there are any statues, if there are anything that would be a sculpture, the sculptures will be abstract and in most cases even geometrical. So when Israel dedicates a new, let's say, fountain, there'll be not even animals in the fountain. Not that, again, we understand that this will be worshiped, but there won't even be a question of whether it's a break of the Ten Commandments. So this is a really important idea that we take it very seriously to this day. And it's one of the reasons why Jews never engaged in the creation of visual fine arts. There was even a question, so when we finally got to the point of drawing pictures and painting pictures, that finally Jews really started doing that in the 1800s, when they kind of said, well, we're not making a statue. It says you're not allowed to make a statue or sculptured image. Question of a likeness, the Hebrew word is tmunah. That's a picture. There's real questions of even whether two-dimensional art was okay. There are some Israeli artists, like Israel's most famous artist is Agam. A lot of people have seen Agam's art. He's actually still alive. He's in his 90s, late 90s. Agam is still revered in Israel as one of the great artists. He never paints anything other than geometric patterns. So he will not do any picture, any kind of representational art. It's all images, it's all geometric patterns, and those are the only images he makes. Israel, to this day, when they mint a coin, it never has an animal and it never has a person on it. The printed money in Israel will have former prime ministers, will have pictures of them on it. There was a shekel note with Golda Meir's picture, with Menachem Begin's picture. There's pictures of them on the money, but not on the coins, because the coins would be considered to be sculptured images. Anything that was three-dimensional was a problem. If you go to Orthodox homes today, you'll see a picture, especially in Chabad homes, of the Rebbe. They'll allow a picture, they never let a statue of the Rebbe. They would never, even some people thought even putting pictures up of the Rebbe was considered a violation of this commandment. So pictures, representations that are going to be able to be seen could also be worshiped. And because of that, they said, don't break this commandment. And so this is a very strict commandment for the Jewish community. I would say even for the non-Orthodox to this day, is And so I know Jews, for example, I mean, I've always felt uncomfortable about it, about getting statuary. You know, you go to South America, you come back with I remember years ago, somebody gave my mom, or I think gave me these little like, these little onyx statues from like in South America or from Mexico. And I was like, I wasn't sure whether I should have them because I thought they were idols, you know, like little Kachina dolls, or you know, whether people said these little idols that they would have would be considered to be idols. Even if you didn't worship them, somebody worshiped them. So there were people who said, no, this is something that we're supposed to avoid. So people do take this very, very strictly. And even when it came to souvenirs, people would say, I don't want to have anything in my house that's an idol, even to this day. So it is an interesting, it's an interesting law. And it's one way that, again, we've prevented ourselves from becoming idol worshipers. Now, look, this became a big issue because some people felt that Christianity became an idol worshiping religion with this. Because if the Trinity is all God, and then people would say, well, it's the first commandment of having no other God besides God is not going to be violated. But what about a statue to Jesus? This was not an issue just for Jews. It was an issue for Jews, but it wasn't just an issue for Jews, because at various times in Christian history, there were Protestant denominations and there were other denominations that were very upset with the use of representations of Jesus in the churches. And there were cases over time, and I've gone to Protestant countries in Europe where they'll take you on a tour and they'll say, there used to be statues of Jesus here, but people came through and broke them because they said they were idols. So this was an issue even in church discussions over the years. It's one of the reasons why many forms of Protestant religions, Protestant denominations, within the Christian faith did not want to have statues because they felt that it was a violation of the 10 Commandments. And so I can't think the closer that people said, well, let's not violate the 10 Commandments. Now you could say, well, what about other parts of the law? Well, there were people who said, let's just not break the 10 Commandments. I don't know whether we have to keep all the laws, but let's keep the 10 Commandments. So 10 Commandments became important for Christians. It's one of the reasons why we're about to get to the Sabbath, the law of Shabbat. It's one of the reasons why Seventh-day Adventists really only keep Shabbat. There are some Seventh-day Adventists who also won't eat pork and won't eat non-kosher meat, but the one law that they decided to keep was 100% the Shabbat because of the 10 Commandments. Because Seventh-day Adventists, and there are other groups too, who said, we have to keep the 10 Commandments. God must have meant those to always be in existence. So there were times when Christianity broke, when Christian groups would come through beautiful churches. I remember I went to one in Holland, and they said, I said, what happened over there? They said, oh, that's when they cut out the statues of Jesus. I said, oh, and the saints. Oh, okay. So they went through. That's what the word iconoclast literally means. The word iconoclast means the person who breaks an icon, the person who breaks an idol. And so it's happened throughout Christian history where they've gone through times when people said, we can't have idols. So this has been an issue. And again, it gets to this idea that you can't represent God in a physical form. It seems to go against what Judaism has tried to teach for a long time, which is that God can't be represented by man-made objects. So these are the first two commandments: not to have other gods, and not to have representations of God or any other gods. But of course, it's not an easy thing to do. Not to bow down to them, not to serve them, etc. But then we come to the third commandment, which is not to swear falsely by the name of God. And here you'll see, not to take it in vain. What's the King James say? Of the Lord in vain, lashav, which is the Hebrew word. For Adonai will not clear one who swears falsely by God's name. So it definitely seems to be using God's name as part of your vows, that you're not supposed to say, I promise by God's name. Now, we don't do that anymore. So most people say we're successful in introducing this idea of not invoking God's name for your promises. I swear, I'm not supposed to say I swear to God. You're not supposed to ever say I'm, but it's more again, the idea of making a promise or making an oath, invoking God, knowing that this is not something to joke with. But of course, people take this to the line of not writing God's name down, right? And so some people will write G-D because they're fulfilling this third commandment, which is not to write God's name and then throw it away. That's why we won't throw away a Torah scroll, because God's name is all over that Torah scroll. And so if it was written by a person, then it should be, it was written by hand, not printed out by a printer, that it should be buried, must be buried. God's name should not be taken in vain, should not be treated with like garbage. So you can't throw away the Torah. So Mike just said, and prayer books too. That is true, though some people say because we're printing it, it doesn't fully have to have the same thing. I always kind of err on this.
Conservatives still.
Well, yes, because I'll tell you why. It's still an issue, or why it's debated. I err on the side of burial. So we have all of our old prayer books we have our own Geniza here at the synagogue where we bury them essentially. Don't throw them away. We put them in a special place. Now, the cemeteries used to have a day where they would gather up stuff and they would bury it in their Geniza. So Eden has one, Hillside has one, Mount Sinai has one. During COVID, they shut them all down. I haven't seen them reopen them. It doesn't mean they haven't, but I don't think at least at Eden, they've reopened it. But look, it was extra work for them. And I don't think they were not in a hurry to do it, but there are lots of prayer books down there. And there's a question now, and especially our prayer books, which are printed or again, they were not written by hand. There is perhaps a rabbinic loophole that was created on this, which is that if they're printed, they're actually not written. And so while the tradition of not throwing anything with God's name away would be based on writing it by hand.
Can you explain though to everybody, what's.
So the idea, yeah. So the idea with printing is that if you looked at printing underneath a scope, if you zoomed in really close, you would see that the printing is actually dots. And so if you have really good printing in the old dot matrix printers, you can see the dots. But if you go in really, zoom in really tight, you can see that there's actually, it's not fully formed letters, that they're dots. So that was kind of the loophole that was there. I would say to some extent that part of the loophole is that it is being printed and it's being mass printed and it's not being done with the intent. A printing machine and a computer don't have the wherewithal, at least yet. They don't have the intelligence to know what they're doing. When someone writes God's name on a piece of paper, which usually was on a paper, it was on a parchment. If they write it on a parchment, the person who wrote it with the intention of writing God's name. So I would say part of it has to do with the intention. Now, again, that doesn't get us off the hook, but a computer printer.
It's great because you're telling the computer what to do. So someone is actually.
Well, there was intention along the way, but
Right.
you can make the argument that the device doesn't have intentionality in it. And for example, let's say I did this. You could say I set my printer, I only wanted to print up 10 copies, but then it printed up 100 copies. I didn't have the intention of printing up 100 copies. I printed up 10. I had the intention of printing 10. So the computer can print without my intention
But
being
you still wrote it out.
correct. But you could say that because the printer had no intentionality in doing it, you could say that unless I actually sat down and wrote it, did I really even mean to do it? So there's a certain intentionality to it, but there's also a certain time level that was put into it. But look, I as I said, I err on the side of burying it, so I don't treat prayer books with disrespect. Partly because again, if people treat it with respect, then it deserves to be treated with respect all the time. So you can't, something doesn't stop being respected because you're not using it anymore, right?
It's just like you're not supposed to put a prayer book
On the ground, exactly. You're not supposed to put something, you're not supposed to put something on top of your prayer book. So, so wait a second. So this is a good point. So Joanne just said, what about your kippah, right? Because people have a tradition, if their kippah drops, they kiss it, right? So there's an interesting thing about that, which I used to do that, but now I stopped because somebody said, that's not really true. It's not like a tallis. A tallis actually is a commanded object. The kippah is a tradition. So it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that you have to wear a kippah. So it's more of a tradition. And then there's a question is the tradition of having a kippah, does that, if you imbue it with importance or tradition of having that be holy, then is it holy? So like, I don't throw my kippahs on the ground, but I'm not as I sometimes do it out of instinct still, because I spent my first 25 years of my life kissing a kippah if it fell on the ground. Because that's what they always told me when I went to day school. They said, you got to kiss it, and if it falls on the ground. So I did. But then I had other people tell me, it's not actually it's a hat. So you don't have to kiss it because you're keeping your head covered, but the head covering itself is not a commandment. You don't actually have to, because tallis is never supposed to be on the ground. Yeah.
Don't have to have something between you and God on your head.
Well, it's a tradition, it's a custom, but it doesn't actually say that you have to. It's been a tradition for a very long time. But whether that's a cap, whether that's a yarmulke, whatever it is, look, a yarmulke was designed for just you to wear on your head, right? For prayer, but not a cap. So if I'm wearing a cap as a yarmulke, which I could, I'm not going to drop my cap on the ground and then pick it up and kiss it. So I get the point. I mean, as I said, but this, it's weird too, because if I'm wearing a yarmulke and I like that yarmulke and I wear it for holy things, I would say I pick it up and I kiss it because it's important to me and because I respect it. But I guess the point is that I'm a little less that it's actually happened. But yeah, I don't leave my yarmulkes on the ground, and I don't because my dog could eat it. But I also, he hasn't done that, by the way, with the yarmulke. He eats everything else.
What if dogs spell backwards? Anyway?
Is God. Yeah, that's right. Very funny. But I don't, he doesn't eat, he'll eat my cat. He'll eat a cat, by the way. He'll eat a cat. Dog will eat dog will eat every other piece of clothing I don't want to get into. But he doesn't eat my yarmulkes. That's pretty interesting. He seems to know. I get really mad if he ate one of my yarmulkes, one of my good ones. This is one that I brought back from Israel, and I brought back some new ones from Israel. But anyways, I try not to lose them either. I wouldn't care very much about losing the cat, but I don't want to lose a yarmulke. But it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird because, it really goes back to this idea that we don't take God's name in vain. We're not disrespectful with things that are holy. Listen, when I carry the Torah in my car, when I go to service or we take it for high holidays, and I worry every time I'm in the car. Like I don't want the Torah in my car for very long. I know some of you, like John's driven the Torah before. Harvey probably's driven Torah. I don't like having that responsibility in my car, because I worry, like if I got in an accident, God forbid, or something, I'd be like, oh my gosh. So it kind of freaks me out to have the Torah scroll. Even to this day, I take it pretty seriously. I want to get it back in the ark. I'm going to get it in a safe place. So it doesn't actually say this in here, but we take it, we put this fence around the Torah so that we not only don't swear falsely by God's name, we don't take God's name in vain, we don't use God's name, we don't just throw God's name around. And so we don't invoke God. We try not to invoke God at all, unless we're praying, unless we're trying to focus our attention in a way that is, again, separating it from our life when we're not doing holy things. So I mean, like if I'm at a sporting event and something happens and I don't like it, I don't go, I don't start talking, I don't throw out God's name. I'll say other things, but I won't say God. I won't say God's name when I'm upset about what's happening at a sporting event. No, I really don't. I mean, I take it, I do take that. I think about it. I take it pretty seriously, but when you live your whole life doing it, you don't think about it that much. But I do, like if I hear one of my kids say something, or if I hear something, and my kids don't do that a lot, but they don't use God's name like that. But if I hear somebody, I sometimes, I'll be taken aback, like I'll be surprised a little bit. So here's the commandment that doesn't have anything to do with anything other than you'd think us as Jews. As I said, Seventh-day Adventists keep it. There's other people who've tried to figure out what it means to them, even if they're not Jewish. And here it is. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekod sho. Sheshet yamim ta'avod va'asita kol malachta. Remember the Sabbath day, remember Shabbat, and keep it holy.
Isn't that also in Genesis?
Remember the seventh day?
Yeah.
It says at the beginning of Genesis, right, in chapter 1, the beginning of chapter 2, that God blessed the seventh day. It doesn't say that people have to keep the seventh day yet. The first law, no, but you're right, because just last week we read about the manna, which comes on Shabbat, right?
And you're supposed to get 2
There's
portions.
2 portions, so we learn about, fine, but we really don't read anything else about Shabbat earlier. Now, let's finish this up and see what they say. 6 days you shall labor and do your work. So it does say, by the way, you got to work the rest of the time. It's not every day. 6 days actually says that, by the way. It doesn't just say keep the Sabbath day, make it holy. 6 days you labor and do your work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of your God Adonai. And you shall not do any work, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is in your settlements. Because in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth and sea, and all that is in them, and then rested on the 7th day. Therefore Adonai blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And there it is, the creation that Mike alluded to, is that it is a remembrance of God's creating. So if God can create in 6 days and then rest on the 7th day, there is nothing that you're doing that is more important than the creation of the universe. So you can.
Rabbi, we lost your audio.
Somebody else type it up there?
Yeah, lost audio.
Can't hear it. We can't hear anything from you, Mark.
No audio.
I hear
You
Joy.
can't hear us, right?
Now we can hear you.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah, but can you see this? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
You're in.
Okay. I don't know. So, yeah,
Oh, yeah, with the Bible tour. Yeah.
all right.
I don't think we're frozen, says because it goes.
Okay, let me try it again then. Hold it.
Big Monday, Tuesday.
Okay. So I don't know why the audio from the. Mike, can you do me a favor? Can you grab me 2 batteries from the wall? Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna try to fix the sound here, guys. But you can hear me now, right? Everybody? You can
Yes,
hear us? Yeah.
yes.
So,
Yes.
so Mike's question of why is it Saturday? We don't call it Saturday in Hebrew. We call Saturday Yom Shabbat. We don't call it Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, Sunday. we call it the first day. Thank you. Let's see. We call it the first day.
I can put the other two back in the truck.
Don't worry about it. Thanks. So,
The old ones.
yeah. All right. Can you still hear me?
Yes,
Okay, so in Hebrew, we say day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and then we go to Yom Shabbat. So in Hebrew, we actually never say the names of the week. In Israel, even to this day, they say Yom Rishon. They say Sunday is not called Sunday; it's called Yom Rishon. To some extent, that's intentional because in the Bible it says day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. There was a first day. It actually says Yom Echad, the first day. But the names that we call our days by are all based on gods. They're basically based on Norse gods for the most part, because like Thursday is Thor's day, and Wednesday is Woden's day, etc. 2 is the god. Sunday and Monday are named after the sun and the moon, but Freya, Friday, the days of the week are the Norse gods. But so we definitely didn't want to use those names. Interestingly, in Spanish, they don't call it Saturday. It was Saturn's day, so that one still had the Roman god Saturn, but they call it Sábado. They call it Sabbath. So in Spanish, they actually call it the Sabbath. So they actually didn't want to call it Saturday. But the day of Saturn being Saturday, being that last day, is actually kind of an indication that Saturn was worshipped as the god of time, and kind of even in pagan religion was connected to Saturn was the god of Jupiter. It's kind of the old god is the god of time. And so to some extent, Saturday is also, by calling it Saturn's day, is also a recognition of time. Because if you remember, Saturn is father of time. He's actually the god of time. So it's an interesting idea that even in pagan mythology, whatever, they kind of kept that alive, that Saturn was somehow connected to time.
Why did the Christians go Sunday?
Why did Christians go Sunday to church? That was a break that the church made in the later 3rd and 4th centuries, because they literally wanted to be different from Judaism. It was a conscious decision to say we're not Jewish anymore. And it was a debate within the church, early church, whether to do that. And not all Christians seemed to.
Went late.
Yes. So we're talking about 300 years late. So the original church did not want to deviate from the Saturday being Shabbat. And so they never did. And it was only later on that the church made that decision. And it was to be away from Judaism, and also to conform with the Roman Empire, which had its first day of the week as the day dedicated to the sun and dedicated to this very important God, which again, we'll make it God's day too. And so they had no issue telling people that they went to church that day, but it was not an easy agreement. And it was one of the things that kind of made Christianity finally really a different religion from Judaism, was the move away from Sabbath. That, and also the move away from Passover, because the original church also celebrated Passover as a very important holiday and wouldn't give up Passover until, again, around the same time. And even then, there was a major fight to keep Passover. I think the fight to keep Passover to some extent was even more of an issue than keeping, interestingly, keeping Shabbat.
Holiday we ever read about.
Yeah, and it's such an important part of Christian story, the fact that the Last Supper and that Easter is connected to Passover. The idea that they were going to separate from Passover, the early Christians, many of them said, you can't do that. Yeah, but I'm talking about 300 years later. I'm talking about during the period when they actually made this decision to worship Sunday. It was very hard for Christians, some early church people, to give up. It was after Constantine. It was after those people where they finally said, hey, we're not going to celebrate Passover anymore. But as we know, they can never really give up Passover, which is why Easter is always the first Sunday after the full moon of spring, which is Passover. Passover is the first full moon of spring, folks. Unless, of course, occasionally it doesn't. Very rarely it happens that Passover happens not then, and that's when Easter is about a month after. But very rarely does that happen. Usually it lines up. It literally has to be that Passover has to be super early. Passover has to be before, it has to be before March 20th, which it doesn't very rarely happens. So it has to happen before, the full moon of that full moon can't be before, it can't be, it can't be before March 20th. So it's very hard for it to happen, and it does. And then Passover and Easter are a month apart, but it very rarely happens. It doesn't happen a lot. And that's why, but they never said, hey, Easter and Passover are always connected. They said it's the first Sunday after the first full moon of so it's always around that time, except for those times that very rarely it isn't, but they don't say it's because of Passover. But anyways, that's why the church did that. And there was this conscious decision. Yeah, because that's how the extra month that we have puts us back into that time so that we are celebrating Passover in the springtime. So Passover always has to be in the springtime. If not, if we didn't have that extra month, we would regress like the Islamic calendar, 11 days every year, and we would eventually not have Passover. Passover would not be in the spring all the time, and it has to be. So, so Shabbat, it says, is the seventh day. Nobody can work. It's interesting here. It even says male and female slaves. How did they have slaves already? They just came out of slavery. They already have slaves. Well, maybe it reflects a time when they will have slaves, but Jewish slaves, I should say Jewish slaves, but slaves to Jewish people are not allowed to work on Shabbat either, which, by the way, would mean that if you had a slave, couldn't work them on Shabbat, and it would mean that you got, well, you can do the math, about 15% less productivity out of your slave if there's a day that he can't work for you. So Jews could have slaves. This is slaves working on Saturday. So there's a question Mike just raised. Can slaves actually work? Can anyone work for you on Shabbos? Which is an interesting question, because if they're not your slave, they're still working for you. Yeah, there's a real question whether you can employ people on Shabbat. There's a real question, do I work on Shabbat? So there are questions of how people get paid and how they work. So for a long time, especially since in the modern age, we understand that it's very hard to not have anybody work for you. If you have a company, if you have a restaurant, if you have a store. Look, when stores were closed on the weekends, it was no issue, but you can't have a store anymore that's not open on. First of all, you're not even allowed to be in a mall if you were closed on Saturday, right? They would say, sorry, you can't, the covenant, the code and covenant of this shopping mall is you have to be open on the weekend. You can't close on Saturdays. Everything in Israel is closed on Saturdays. It's true. Almost everything. It's very hard to find a restaurant that's open on Saturdays. It's very hard to find anything open before sundown on Saturday. Not impossible, but in Tel Aviv, it's a little easier. In Jerusalem, it's almost impossible. And so it is an interesting question about keeping Shabbat. So on Saturday, we're always in Jerusalem. And so normally what we do is we give people an option on Saturdays. If they want it, if they don't want to go to synagogue and rest on Saturdays, we give them an option. This year, as we're giving them an option to go to Bethlehem on Saturday and have a whole day of touring. What? You can eat at the hotel. So the hotels don't cook on Saturdays. So those wonderful buffets that you get in Israel, on Saturday, you still get a wonderful buffet, but you don't get any hot food. So you don't get to have a wonderful omelet on that day. You get to have cereal, and they have pre-made eggs. I had a wonderful sandwich. The Saturday that I was in Israel, I had a wonderful egg sandwich, but it was a cold egg sandwich.
But you can't get things, when I was in Israel, I mean, you can get hot things if they're already
Hot,
cooked in.
correct.
And yes.
Yes, so in Israel, you can get coffee on Shabbat, but you ain't gonna get a fresh made cup of coffee at that beautiful buffet. They'll give you a packet of coffee, whatever, and then you pour it into your hot cup. Yeah, some people go to Arab restaurants on Saturday. Is it true? In Jerusalem. In Tel Aviv, it's easier to find Jewish owned establishments that are open. But yes, this whole concept of employing people on Saturdays is a tricky one. It is definitely possible to do it, but you are giving up a tremendous amount of
So did you feel guilty when you were getting air conditioning?
on Saturday. Yeah, the bigger problem is that I had a service, a bat mitzvah last Saturday.
Mhm.
And so I was home when the guy was working. But yeah, I don't like having people do work for me on Saturdays. Look, there was a tradition that people would hire Shabbos goys, they called them, right? Which was a weird thing to say because, as you said, the word goy doesn't actually mean anything bad, but we usually use it in a pejorative, in a derogatory way to say goy. But a Shabbos goy was somebody who did your work for you on that day. But can you really hire them to do it? I guess if they're not your slave, they can do it. So they could turn on your air conditioning or they could turn on your lights.
Someone used to have this 17 Dennis help them on that.
Yeah, Seventh-day Adventists helping on high holidays, but really shouldn't be doing it on Saturdays though, because they're also worshiping on Saturdays. So there's a real question of what you could ask somebody to do on Shabbat. Look, if I had my druthers and I had my ability to have somebody, I would not have them come on a Saturday. Wouldn't have an employee come. I wouldn't have a gardener look, I don't have a lot of employees, right? I don't employ a whole host of people, but I have a gardener and I have somebody who helps out with our pool and stuff, but I wouldn't have them come on Saturdays. But I could, because it's the only day that I know for sure I'm going to be home, at least for part of the day. I wouldn't do that. So there's a real question about it. Now, I will tell you, it is possible in the modern world to give Saturday off. And I will tell you that one of the most successful, if not the most successful electronic computer retailer in the world is B&H Photography in New York. They're huge. They're audio visual. They're who we bought these cameras from. B&H is huge, and they have amazing prices. They're ultra Orthodox owned, family owned company. They sell all across the country. I was at the NAB conference in Vegas this past year, and they had one of the biggest booths in the whole conference. They are huge. Was that NAB or CES? Anyways, they're huge. I recommend B&H completely. Amazing company for electronics, at least for the prices. The service is not always great, but I have a couple of people there that I call, and they have a lot of Gentile employees. It's not just that they have only Jews who work there, but it's owned by Jews. The amazing thing about B&H, their website is shut on Shabbos. You can't buy from their website on Shabbos. It was amazing. Somebody told me that. I went on, and sure enough, it says we're closed for Shabbat.
If you're
It doesn't matter. So they have, I don't know what their business is. I mean, somebody could look at how much business it is. They will not be open on Shabbos
Can you buy it online then?
once it's
I
over.
go online now. Can I buy something?
Yeah,
That's why they don't want to handle money.
yeah. But I'm saying, they're not even handling the money. The computer is.
Doesn't matter. Still,
They won't do it.
They still feel they're.
Yeah. And so it is possible for people to do it. I wonder how much they give up by doing it. Look, for people who keep the Sabbath strictly, there are Christians who do it too. Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays. They take it seriously. I mean, there are people who do it. There are other stores that are closed on Sundays by people who keep Sunday as a holy day. But I will tell you this, it's not an easy thing to do in today's world, but there are people who are willing to do it. And then there's a question. There's also, again, a question, I would say, look, they take a very stringent Orthodox line on it, whether having your website run on Shabbat would be considered work. Because look, you can make the argument that the website itself, even being accessible on Shabbat, is technically by the same line, it's actually operational on Shabbat. So I don't know. I mean, you could make the same argument that somebody's being paid to maintain that website on that day. But look, I get it. They're not hiring people. I don't know. Anyways, they're very stringent about it. So Shabbat is very important for us. It's been important for us for thousands of years. It's the day that we also, again, would say, whatever we do, besides not working, it's supposed to be a day where we rest and where we recognize that time is important, that time is valuable.
I've asked this question before. question again. How do you, how do you guys substantiate working on Shabbat?
So how do I work on Shabbat or days that I'm not supposed to be working, when in reality, that's most of what I do, right?
Right.
So look, a long time ago, when rabbis became people who led services, remember, rabbis did not lead services until the last 200 years. Yeah, we didn't lead services. That was not part of what we did. Our job was to decide cases. Essentially, we were lawyers, judges. That's what we were. And so we never would do our work on Shabbat. Nobody came to the rabbi for a decision on Shabbat. You never do. They wouldn't do it. So the chazan, the person who led the service, they're working on Shabbat. You can make the argument. So the chazan worked. Okay, but here's the thing. The chazan was an honor. It was an honor that people got. Now you could say, well, we want somebody with a good voice. Well, they'd ask somebody with a good voice. But the chazan wasn't even the only person who read who was leading the service, because they'd have a Baal Koreh who would read the Torah, and you'd have another person who would probably daven the Pskei Zimra, the opening prayers, and you'd have another person who would daven another part of the service. So even the chazan, even the title, okay, but chazans didn't get paid until about 200 years ago. It's the same thing. So a professionalization of the service necessitated, you could say, this kind of little loop around, which is it said, well, we don't really pay the rabbi to work on Shabbat. We pay him to work every other day. We don't, or now we don't pay them to work on Shabbat. I don't get paid on Saturdays. I don't get paid on high holidays. I get paid after high holidays. But it is it is an interesting issue because, again, let's face it, a rabbi's job essentially is to help run the services and to help run Shabbat and to help run the high holidays and these other things. But, fortunately for me, and again, maybe it's the case for other people too, it's just a fraction of what I do, So if I added up the time that I spend, thinking about high holidays, which is a lot, but it's still nothing compared to how much time I spend teaching. So the issue is that this is not, to me, and again, people would say, yeah, but this is when everyone's going to come. This is when people will decide whether they want to still be members or whether they want to make a donation. Yeah, it's unfortunate to some extent, but that's the way we've created. Correct. So even Orthodox rabbis, you could make the argument, are working on Shabbat, but it's literally what we would say is the kind of the workaround of saying, but you're not really being paid. But it's weird because everybody knows the contract says you've got to be here for X amount of Shabbat services. I mean, everybody knows that's not implied. It's specifically written in the contract how many Shabbos the person has to be here for, what services they have to lead. Because sometimes a rabbi will say, well, I lead this amount of services and the other rabbi leads this amount of services. I don't have a co-rabbi, so I don't have anybody like that. See, Joanne was from a synagogue in Detroit where there were 6 rabbis. There's still 6 or 10 rabbis there. Yeah, they did. But it's rapidly becoming not an issue. So
someone could take your place on a Tuesday or
Uh-huh.
Wednesday. Or if you had an
assistant rabbi, yeah. Mhm.
We wouldn't know if you went to a baseball game or
Mhm.
whatever, because you would have,
I would.
Mhm.
Mike, I'm not talking to you. Anyway, negotiate with that person beforehand.
Yeah,
But you
Yeah.
don't have that.
yeah. So that's why I look like I'm 20 years older than I am. Services, yeah. Okay, well, okay, whatever. All I'll tell you is you guys brought up the subject. I wasn't gonna bring it up, though I.
Brought it up last year.
Yeah. So this is where we're going to leave off today. We read the first 4 commandments. We're going to start with respecting your parents next week. So next week, you get a week off before you have to deal with this one, which is honoring your parents, which is the next commandment. So the first 4 commandments deal with God. The next 6 commandments deal with people. And that's one of the ways we break them up. The commandments that deal between ourselves and Hashem, ourselves and God, and then with other people. Now, Shabbat, you could argue, is a little bit of both, because if your slaves aren't working on Shabbat, it means it also has an effect on other people. You're right, too, the animals. But we would say, for the most part, remembering Shabbat is a holy thing to do. It's a representation, an acting like God, because we're not creating, we're not doing stuff on Shabbat that we do the rest of the week. And it is, for us, definitely It doesn't say it here, but later on it'll say that the Shabbat, it says in Isaiah, is supposed to be, God says to Isaiah, tell the people, it's Kore Oneg. It's a day that we would call, that you should call it a joy, an Oneg, a celebration. So Shabbat isn't just a day of not working, but it's also a day of celebrating. And that's what an Oneg is supposed to be, a celebration. It's not just the not working part, it's making it, and not just a holy part, which it says here, right here, hallow it, make it holy. And it says right here, keep the Sabbath day and keep it holy, Kodesh. But it's also a day of celebration. It's a day to rejoice and be happy and to do fun stuff. So I hope everyone has a fun rest of the week. And I hope that you will see you on Shabbat. Rick and Abby will be here. And I will be here too. All right, Shabbat Shalom. Not Tovah in advance. Happy New Year. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Love
6
you
more
all.
commandments coming.
Love you, Joyce.
Love you, Joy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.